Hello everyone, welcome back to Carl Fix. It's been a while, but today I'm going to follow up on my shorts video from the other day where we are going to repair this crack in my kitchen wall plaster. And the few steps that you need to do this properly, which I'll run through quickly at the start of the video. One is widen the crack. If you try and fill the crack when it's like that, it won't fill properly and it will continue to crack along the seam of the crack. So it's imperative to widen the crack. 2 is sand. 3 is fill. Let the filler dry. Again, sand it back. And then the last one is paint over it, and hopefully you'll never see the crack again. So let's get straight into this. And right from the top, I use a Phillips head screwdriver for this. You can use a Stanley knife or whatever, but you need to brutally, and it looks like brutal, strip some of this plaster back in the crack. And it can be a bit nerve-wracking to do this for the first time because you think, oh my god, I'm making it worse. But trust me, you need to do it to get a proper finish. So you can see there, it now looks a lot worse than it did previously. So you want to make sure you start right at the top of the crack, because if you leave a hairline crack like that, it will crack from there again. So you need to make sure you widen the edge of the crack. Right, so as you can see now, there's a defined groove all the way up where the crack was, from the top to the bottom. So it'll no longer split in the hairline crack. So what you need to do now is get a bit of sandpaper and get in there and just define that V. Smooth off any paint that's cracked, and just make sure you've got a nice surface for the filler to go into. As with most painting and DIY jobs, preparation is the key. So if you do this bit right, the filling will be easy. If you do the preparation wrong, you'll be able to see the filler because you won't have been able to blend it properly into the crack if you leave the hole too thin. So make sure you get a nice groove in there. So now we will move on to wiping it down and filling. So here I've got some filler I've mixed up. This filler is the stuff you mix yourself, like plasterers use and whatnot. This is what I've got, but you can use the pre-mixed stuff like, I don't know, this kind of thing. If you're just doing 1 or 2 cracks around your house, you probably don't want to be spending on a massive bag of filler. Obviously, spending in previous videos, you know I've been doing a lot of filling around my house, so I've got a massive bag, but just get the stuff on the filler on your blade and just fill. You want to make sure the crack is well filled. Really push it in there. Get plenty on. And what you don't want to worry about is making sure it's too flat, that it's flat now. If anything, you want it to be a little bit proud of your fill line, so when you sand it back, you're not sanding into your filler and then you have a gap. Obviously, I'm not a professional, so this is just the way I do it as a DIYer to make sure I get a nice flat finish. I'll put a bit of excess on. Obviously, if you're a professional, you probably put a bit less than this on just because it's less sanding. But to do 1 or 2 cracks in your house, I'd advise putting a little bit extra on and doing a little bit of extra sanding, just so you make sure you're fully filling the hole. because what you can do is over sand, and then you end up, when you paint, you can see the gap again. You can see where you've created the crack, the gap, because it'll just dip in slightly concave, is it, where it just moons in lightly, and when the light hits the paint you'll be able to see the crack. So I advise slightly over putting on your filler if you're a DIYer, to then sand back off. So we're going to have to let that go off now, so I'll come back to you once the filler's fully dry. So now we're on to the sanding. So what we're going to do is sand gently in a large circular or square motion, because you don't want to be sanding into your crack with one finger and creating that concave again. You want to do it over a wide area so it becomes perfectly flat. Don't worry about this, you can clean it up and obviously paint it as well afterwards. So now I can run my hand over it now, it's pretty much sanded back, and just feel that it's really smooth. You should be able to feel if there's any low points or high points, because you'll catch your finger or whatever on the edge. And you can always give it a tiny skim coat of filler if needed. So from here we'll clean it up, and then you get to painting if you don't need a skim coat. I'll just wipe it with a slightly damp cloth just to get any dust off the wall. And now we'll paint. Obviously you need the same colour as you painted the wall originally. As you can see, you just need to wait for the paint to dry and see how it looks. Like I say, it's potential. You may need to do a skim coat of filler and a very light sand back, or you might need a couple of coats of paint, because the filler will absorb the paint quicker than the wall, so you might see that the filler starts to show through the paint slightly. So we'll come back once the paint is dry, because of the light reflecting off it you can still see the crack, because the paint's still wet, so the light bounces off it. So there you have it guys, there's the finished result. You can see the paint marks a bit because it's still a little bit wet, and obviously it's really bright in here, but to the actual naked eye you can't actually see those paint lines, so it's just on the camera. But the main thing is, obviously it's easy to paint, but you can't see that line of that crack whatsoever, and that's what we're mainly here for. It's very easy to paint. If it needs an extra coat of paint, that's easy for me to do at a later stage, but as you can see the crack is totally disappeared. So if you like this tutorial, check out my other videos, hit like, favourite and subscribe, and I'll see you on the next one.